Origins and early years. Before the iron skeleton of Ravenswood Sanatorium clawed at the sky, before the screams and whispers echoed through its cold stone corridors, there was only a hillside. Gentle, untouched, cradled by the mists of West Virginia, it was a patch of forest known by the locals as Crow's Hollow. Deer grazed along the ridge, owls nested in the sycamores, and wildflowers painted the land in spring. But peace is fragile when sickness walks the land. In 1896, the property was purchased by a young physician named Dr. Samuel Whitaker. Driven by the tragic loss of his wife and daughter to tuberculosis, Whitaker was obsessed with creating a place that could heal what doctors at the time barely understood. He envisioned a retreat of air, light, and quiet. A place away from the choking cities, where victims of the White Plague might find peace, or at least a dignified end. Whitaker wasn't a madman, but he was possessed. With borrowed funds and community support, construction began in 1901. The original structure was a modest two-story wooden house with wide porches and large windows, what was then called a rest cure house. It welcomed its first patients in 1903, mostly women and children too poor for city hospitals. By 1906, its reputation as a place of care had spread across 3 counties, but with fame came bodies. More came in sick than left healed, and the whispering began. Rise of the White Death. The early 20th century saw a wave of death sweep across America. Tuberculosis, then incurable, spread through coal towns, schoolhouses, and tenement buildings. West Virginia, with its mines and mills, was a breeding ground. By 1910, over 20% of local deaths were from TB. Desperation built a new wing at Ravenswood. This expansion marked a shift. Where the original house had charm, the new buildings had bulk. Red brick walls, vaulted ceilings, and rows of iron-framed beds. 5 stories high, the main building opened in 1914 and housed up to 300 patients. With that came a morgue, a surgical wing, and a tunnel, later known as the Whisper Tunnel, used to discreetly move the dead from the upper floors to waiting wagons down the hill. Life at Ravenswood was paradoxical. On good days, the porches were filled with coughing patients bundled in blankets, taking in mountain air under sun lamps. On bad days, surgical screams rang through the walls. Experimental procedures, collapsing lungs, injecting gold into muscles, removing ribs, were performed with the best of intentions, but often lethal results. Records show that by 1922, over 6,000 had passed through Ravenswood. Roughly 4,000 were buried on nearby land. Inside Ravenswood, life and death in the hospital. Nurses called the 3rd floor the Bleeders' Ward. It was reserved for patients with advanced TB whose lungs had all but liquefied. Their coughs painted sheets red. The floor had drains installed beneath each bed. Orderlies wore aprons. Patients were awakened each morning at 5 a.m. for air therapy. No matter the season, they were wheeled to open porches. Winter wind tore at their clothes. Frostbite was common, but fresh air was doctrine. Meals were boiled oats, weak broth, and powdered milk. Visitors, when allowed, had to wear cloth masks soaked in carbolic acid. Doctors worked long hours, often living in quarters beneath the sanatorium. One, Dr. Emmett Greaves, is noted in journals for surviving 3 self-inoculations of TB to prove an experimental serum. He died on his 4th attempt. The Whisper Tunnel was no secret to patients. Though they couldn't see the bodies being removed, they could hear the metal wheels on the rails at night. It became an omen. If the wheels squeaked, someone had died. Yet there were moments of humanity. Nurses taught children to read. A piano on the 2nd floor was often heard playing hymns. Patients married. Some recovered. But the death toll never stopped. Transition, decline, and abuse allegations. By the 1950s, streptomycin changed everything. TB could now be treated effectively. Admissions dropped. Ravenswood, its wards now half empty, searched for purpose. In 1959, it reopened as Ravenswood State Hospital, a geriatric and psychiatric care facility. Patients with dementia, schizophrenia, and severe disabilities were brought in from across the state. But the change wasn't smooth. Records show understaffing, underfunding, and poor sanitation. Former staff testified in the 1980s about residents being restrained for days, unwashed, unfed. In 1974, a nurse named Harriet Vaughan disappeared during her shift. Her body was never found. In 1983, after a series of exposés, the state ordered Ravenswood's closure. Its last patients were relocated in April 1984. The building was padlocked. Nature took over. Abandonment and haunting. The years that followed turned Ravenswood into a myth. Roofs collapsed. Ivy claimed the windows. Graffiti coated the patient murals. The Whisper Tunnel flooded and froze. Urban explorers came first. Then came ghost hunters. By 1997, Ravenswood had become synonymous with fear. Reports surfaced of sightings, a child with a red ball, a shadow clinging to the ceiling, voices calling names not uttered in decades. EVP recordings caught phrases like "get out" and "still here." In 2004, a fire set by trespassers gutted the West Wing. In 2008, a preservation society bought the land at auction. They did nothing. Then came the Dawsons. Ghosts, legends, and supernatural activity. Charlie and Melissa Dawson were not ghost hunters. They were history teachers from Tennessee. But in 2011, they purchased Ravenswood for $130,000, intending to restore it as a historical site. Locals laughed, but the Dawsons leaned into the legend. They cleaned the Whisper Tunnel, restored windows on the main ward, and re-roofed the entryway. Then they opened the gates. Ravenswood began offering historical tours by day and ghost tours by night. The Dawsons documented every supernatural claim. Visitors reported a little girl named Eli who bounces a red ball. The Rook, a shadowy figure said to crawl on ceilings. Unseen hands brushing skin. Cold spots in the morgue. Sobbing in the children's ward. Photos captured orbs. Some showed faces in broken mirrors. Paranormal shows began airing episodes filmed on site. Modern era, tours, events, and future plans. Every October, Haunted Ravenswood draws thousands. The Dawsons donate proceeds to continued restoration. Daytime tours focus on architecture and TB history. Night tours are led with EMF detectors and thermal cams. The Dawsons plan to build a small museum on the first floor, showcasing medical tools, journals, and artifacts found on site. Long-term, they hope to convert a wing into a haunted bed and breakfast. But they refuse to forget what Ravenswood was, a place of pain, hope, and human perseverance. Whether haunted by ghosts or memory, Ravenswood Sanatorium remains a place where history lingers. And if you visit, don't ignore the whisper at your ear or the child's laugh in the dark. Some doors once opened never truly close.